right. Hello, IRMSA members, and welcome to this first in the series of conversations with members. As we know, we're not able to meet in person as we do at different IRMSA events. So let's hope that these sessions help us to just reconnect and have discussions that we normally look forward to at the different events where we see each other. My name is Vanessa. I work for Mondial Consultants, and I'm based in the Western Cape and serve with Antonella Da Cunha on the Western Cape Committee. And it's my pleasure to have her join us today and be able to ask her a couple of questions. Antonella is the Group Risk Manager at Capespan, and she's also the chairman of our Western Cape Committee. And she'll be talking to us about the Capespan's board preparedness for COVID, what is its lessons learned so far from the crisis, and how has this disruption highlighted the need to adopt a new way of thinking and reinvent ourselves as an organization and promote that risk oversight. So yeah, welcome Antonella. And I think if we can just start with, what has risk management done well in Capespan in managing COVID so far?
So thank you, Vanessa, and thank you very much to IRMSA. I think it's a privilege to pioneer this opportunity of and exchanging conversations closer and bringing IRMSA into your lounge, onto your couch, and you can watch us anytime and rewatch us. So yes, welcome everybody, and thank you very much. I think, and I'd like to say that the stance is not Capespan. It's my observations. It's where we sit as risk management. And definitely what we've seen, what I've observed is that there's either the guys that have deployed risk management extremely well following the COVID announcement, or they have just fallen by the wayside and are not coping, okay? So the deployment and the rapid response strategy that has been activated to mitigate this complex risk has surprised me. The adaptive system that management have taken to execute the business continuity plan has gone far beyond the fluid crisis situation and has gone far beyond the workshops and the simulations that we've had. You know, in our organization, and there I will say, Capespan has triggered a collaborative, consultative, high-tech approach to the risk and to managing the day-to-day of the business. So for me, that was a wonderful surprise. I don't think anyone would have expected the BCM to actually trigger that way. I don't know about you. Have you come across that, Vanessa, in your experiences, from where you sit?
Yeah, we've seen, again, as you say, the different reactions. We've got some clients who are absolutely on the ball and actually making a lot of progress and being very innovative in how they are now looking at risk differently. But then there's others who are just tucking tail and I think hoping that it's all going to go away. But I think this really highlights risk management and business continuity management to such a level of how important it is. And it's really rocked us because, as I'm sure we'll touch on later, the pandemics have always been on risk registers, but never at this level and never to the interconnectedness of what we're looking at now and how much it's being affected.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think the board, or be it Capespan or other industries, other organizations, what do you think they need to be doing now in terms of risk management?
Right now, I would probably block it into three types of activities. They need to reprioritize their top risks. There's no doubt about that. They need to redefine their reporting. No doubt about that. And probably something that has been left, besides redefining the risk, the board needs to be more conscious of cyber risk, but the opportunity that it brings. Okay, so those are the three things that I think are very important. And when I say reprioritize the risk, it doesn't mean that as a board you're going to say, I'm going to forget the legacy risks of my key customer, because that key customer risk remains if you have only 5 customers that are key to your business. However, we need to be more rigorous in our process and have more of an oversight on emerging risks. And that's where the reprioritization comes in. The pandemic has revealed that supply chain disruption, geopolitical turmoil, overflowing of risks from one area to another is, it is possible. I mean, I was speaking to our FT this morning and I said to her, until very recently, for me personally, a global pandemic was at the very bottom of the risk of the strategic risk register. In fact, I want to be quite frank and honest, it was a blockbuster movie, a science fiction story that it would never happen to the degree that it's happened. Disease was drastic, where there's drastic impact on life and on business. So certainly I think the board needs to reposition itself in terms of emerging risks and check its supply chain and say, what is the worst case scenario? In terms of redefining reporting, it needs to emulate the dynamic risk landscape. So in my experience, you identify the strategic risks once a year, and then they go onto a board piece of paper, which is a dead piece of paper, and everybody goes, tick, 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 we've done it. Yes, we know about it, and the report has the same fine-tuning. Every now and then you'll say, oh, well, the rand has got weaker, and we managing or hedging or doing this or doing that. And so it keeps the same theme because it's very comfortable, huh? It's very comfortable when the risks remain very the same. So analyzing the mega trends and keeping an eye on the micro and macro environment is so important. And then touching on the last thing, like I said, cybersecurity oversight, cyber vulnerabilities, the board needs to have sufficient time to focus on not only the risk of cyber, but the opportunity that it's given us. I think more important on this is that cyber is a paradox. It's either going to kill you or it's going to make you fly like a Boeing. Because it enables the business and it gives the business the opportunity to launch into a resilient strategic blend. And only companies that have made that switch, that have realized, yes, it's important for me to recognize that there's cyber risk for my employees at home, but what's the advantage? What's the real-time impact of being technologically enabled, connected? What is it? And then you have a totally different outcome, don't we?
Yeah, and I think to go back to your how the pandemic risk was always rated on our risk register, I think we were only ever looking at the health impacts, not all this interrelated, the risks that it's not just, this is not just posing risks to our organizations as businesses, it's posing risks via our employees and the issues that they're contending with and dealing with. And I think, to try now as a board to stay ahead of that risk curve, I think we need to start a completely different way of identifying our risks, and as you said, focusing on the opportunity side as well, and not just having this traditional approach. But how else do you think the board needs to evolve in their role in risk management? And traditionally we've got the oversight, but where is there opportunity to change how we're actually operating as a board within risk management?
Vanessa, I look at my experiences because my experiences are normally quite, one always refers to them. So in my experience, risk management on the Finance and Risk Committee agenda and the strategic risks, etc., is right at the bottom of the agenda and it doesn't take priority. So the first thing that the board needs to do is turn it upside down. The pandemic has turned us upside down. So put risk in the forefront and say to the board, say to the Finance and Risk Committee, we're going to take 15 minutes before we actually start the business of the day. And let's talk about the emerging risks. Let's talk about what's happening and have we got those in our strategic risk environment? Have we got the right responses? So perhaps that's where it should start. Secondly, the traditional board, some of them, not all of them, are little people, we won't say if they're men or women with packs of board documents, very little technological enablement. So their tech knowledge to stay abreast of risks is very important. So technologically, and then use experts, because we all know if I speak to myself and only myself, then I'll only have one version of what's good or what's bad or what my plans are. But if I go and call a couple of experts or get a session arranged by Mondial or whoever and say, let's brainstorm these risks for 10 or 15 minutes, suddenly you've got a new perspective, you've got new solutions, you've got new horizons, you've got a new risk landscape. So the board needs to use experts, it needs to use technology, it needs to respond to the opportunities, because as much as they think there aren't opportunities, there always are. We just seem to be avoiding them. I stumbled on a quote this morning, and John Maxwell, the American author on leadership, said that the pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the leaders adjust their sails. And I think that's what we're asking the board to do, is to adjust their sails. They cannot, or they can no longer just be receiving information and take it as read. They need to go a step further.
And I think, I totally agree with you there. And I think that John Maxwell's brilliant, and that quote is so perfect for this situation, because I think we have been preaching this for so long, to change the way we do things, change the way we think about things as leaders, and using risk management to do that in very smart ways. But this whole situation now with COVID has forced us. And the organizations that are going to come out of this in a resilient manner are those who have adjusted their sail. Use the wind.
Use the wind, exactly.
Yes. And as we say there, becoming more future fit. And, we saw Clem Santer's webinar yesterday, and with his article with his different scenarios. And what are your thoughts on the future and within our organizations, and how we need to deal with looking at that, within the risk management approach?
So one of the things that struck me during this time is that, we've left the risks generally the same, and everybody's been happy to accept that. And B, we haven't paid enough attention to emerging risks. We all knew in November that Wuhan had a problem, but not many of us thought that it would spread across from the east to the west in the degree that it's gone. So the emerging risk. But the third thing, and it's something that's probably, I know, very close, and you're a very good expert on this, is recalibrating our risk appetite. And recalibrating our risk appetite doesn't necessarily mean curtailing it, trimming it, cutting it. It also means taking a bit of risk where there is an opportunity to make hay of the day that you have. And I mean, it's unfortunate that the pandemic has ruined so many people's lives, businesses, countries, and it's going to be the war of risk and of the globe that none of us would have ever imagined. But it definitely highlights the importance of adjusting your risk appetite, highlighting those boundaries, and as a board, normally they would sit very, very conservatively and not push that boundary up. Now they should actually take the opportunity and say, where can I adjust my tolerance? How effective can I be to contributing and evaluating and defining the enterprise risk appetite of this organization? So the appetite conversation, I think, is something that will enable the board to become more future fit, more than ever before. The board, I think at this stage, there's a very good reminder that if they do not use this opportunity of this risk, they will not be ready for the next black swan, whenever it may be and however it may come.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's got that level of the sort of foundation that if there's another knock, next year, I don't think any of us have got that ability to handle it necessarily. But back to your, looking at things differently and what are our options, I think there's some wonderful case studies out there of how organizations have started to do something differently. We've seen now these, in our area, these fresh produce boxes that are now being delivered. Companies here or restaurants and stuff now doing takeaway menus only. Distilleries is now making sanitizer.
Exactly.
They've got all the equipment, and I think it's been fantastic to see how places, how companies have adjusted to now doing that. But then there are a lot who haven't and are suffering extremely and will do so. And I think there's obviously particular industries are going to be harder hit than others. How do you think the agricultural industry is going to fare? I mean, we've seen all the problems in Witzenberg with the high counts there because of that whole pack house that had infection rates. But how has it actually affected Capespan's operation?
So I'd like to think that we in the exception, because we were out of the blocks very early. In fact, towards the beginning of March, we had 120 people working from home. And some of our competitors are still in the office because technologically they weren't able to do it. They said, well, we can't. We don't have laptops for 100 people. We had about 20% that didn't have laptops. They quickly scrambled and got them. There were people that didn't have the right data connection, because that is the most important enablement for the marketing side of the fruit. In terms of agriculture and running the farms, etc., the business of packing, harvesting, growing fruit, etc., is fundamentally pegged on health and safety, HACCP standards, and all the. So in essence, all we've done is upped our game, repositioned them, done more training, added some more masks, added some more sanitizing. But you're working with food, so you have that level, that standard that is already within you. So I think the agricultural community and businesses have done extremely well. And fortunately, which is not the right indicator, the weakness of the rand will mean that a lot of them will be able, if they've sold fruit on export markets, they'll be able to come through this with a few lessons, but not with much harm. The question is, if we didn't have a weak rand, how would your book look? What would your income statement look like? Because if it's business as usual and you haven't changed the way you're doing business, then you've got a problem. And again, we were having internal conversations. We said, right, it's very clear now in terms of certain activities. Do we need all these activities? It's also very clear on how micromanage you've got to manage the supply chain, because not having enough enough containers in your ports, not having enough inspectors because there's been a infection, whether it's a DAF infection or an MSC infection or your own infection at your own premises, that becomes quite scary. So I think in general, because it was part of essential service, so we had the time to adjust ourselves. B, because the BCM was phenomenal. And C, because the standards, health and safety and food safety standards are already there. It didn't mean thinking outside the box. It just meant enhancing it. But the opportunity lies in the guys that were able to really optimize that risk and have a response plan that grew the shareholder value. I'll give you some examples. For example, you've got fruit on a container vessel heading east, going to India. 7 days before arrival in India, it closes down. Now you've got to divert that vessel. You've got to send it somewhere else. Do you send it to Bangladesh, Taiwan, China? China was still closed. So thinking on your feet, because remember, it's not a widget that fits into anybody's house. This customer might take a small apple, that customer might take a big apple, that customer doesn't like green, that customer likes red. So it's being able to, and again, I think I said it earlier, we having a consultative, collaborative joint process was one of the key winners of the process. Because if just Antonella took the decision on where that apple should go, then you'll only have one or two versions. But if everybody spoke about it, so in the turbulence lies the change and the opportunity to grow your business.
Yeah. And do you think this then starts to make a stronger case for risk management? You know, we always talk of it as we've got a sales pitch to the board and leadership to tell them that good management of our risks is going to get us through a particular crisis, or risk management often is it not just by luck that we've got through. You know, we so often have to convince the board and our leadership teams that it's risk management that is going to be the enabler. So how do you think COVID has created a business case for risk management?
I've definitely experienced it. Apart from I've experienced how suddenly they've realized, okay, there's definitely a value in having a risk manager on board, someone that looks outside the supply chain or the packing chain or whatever. So we've seen that the board, the senior management have definitely valued, if I can call it, the value of risk management. But the interesting part for me, Vanessa, was that it's not about having the risk manager or the process. It's about, again, going back to what I said, it's consultative. It's this joint team that decides to manage the risks together. Okay, so it's a culture. It's a culture of rigorous attention, involvement. The business case for risk management definitely highlights that you don't need to only focus on the downside. So India's closed, so where else can we go? You know, and sometimes you'll find suddenly, okay, let's go to Dubai. The lemons are selling at $50 a carton and not 12. It is a short window. If we can get it into that market, it's great. So finally, you know, I think business benefits of effective risk management process definitely extend beyond the crisis management that we've had. And there's definitely a lot of value in the foresight. So quite often as risk management, you'll sit and you'll say, watch out for the pandemic. And everybody goes, oh, Antonella, you know, do you really believe that? Now, I think the new way, thinking forwardly, providing clarity in terms of the strategy and making sure that you have assessed all your stakeholders, suddenly there's great value. So it's, I think definitely there's a strong case for risk management more than ever before.
Yeah. So often when we have these crisis events, it's a big I told you so from all the risk professionals of this, you know, this is what we should have been doing. What would you say, just as a sort of, you know, nearing the end, is what do you think the biggest challenge has been for, again, Capespan or other organizations that you interact with, the biggest challenges for leadership in the board?
The biggest challenge for leadership in the board is to think on their feet, probably, and to have the agility. So if you don't have an agile leadership team with the agile thought process in terms of scenario planning and strategic support, you might find yourself that you're just not going to get there by the time, and the situation is so fluid. So if you're not agile, you're not going to be able to get there. So I'll go back to the Capespan example. We used to have an operational meeting once a week. It was, I won't say it was attended. I won't say good or bad. We now have an operational meeting, 15 to 30 minutes every day, and we have up to half of the office on that ops meeting. Okay? Not everybody is there to deliver. A lot of people are there to receive information or to get prompted. So you have suddenly a totally different approach to the leadership style, where it used to be in a box, a closed box behind a closed door, and you had 3 doors to get to it. Now it's open and says, no, it's all available. Leadership, I think, have now realized the fact that risks and business is interrelated and interdependent. So the only way that they can actually approach it when you have a risk or an opportunity is to have a consolidated, complementary cooperative approach, because the risks are deep and they're complex. So the only way you're going to get through it is having an adaptive risk system. The risk ecosystem is not simple anymore. It's not a singular risk. It's complex. There's a convergence of a series of risks. It's people, it's environment, it's cash flow, it's money, it's exchange rates, it's shipping. It's all over the place. So, I think the science of risk management has always told us that risks don't happen in isolation. And as risk managers, we've learned that. But to experience it, you'll never forget it. And I think that's where leadership has now suddenly realized, COVID has shown us the importance of strong leadership, the importance of leadership that's present, the board that's present. It's so essential, not a board that meets every 3 or 4 months to tick the box and to say that they have seen what's happening. And perhaps suddenly they've realized that we have so much to learn. The virtues of a virtual world is so enabling. As we sit here today, you in Montague and me in Durbanville, and just look at it. I mean, it is so enabling to our future, so enabling to our IRMSA members. So well done, IRMSA. You've been creative and innovative, and it will definitely distinguish all of us in terms of the risk leaders that we are.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And you've covered my last question as well with the sort of lessons learned. It's been a tough learning curve, but resilient organizations will learn from those lessons and go forward. And let's see what the next couple of months, or hopefully not years, will hold. And it really will, in Darwin's theory, the strongest survive. So, which is sad for some, but we really need to just make sure we've got our organizations in the most robust place that they can possibly be. I don't know if you've got anything else that you want to add.
I forgot one thing, and that is the biggest lesson that companies may have learned is that they need to reinvent themselves continuously. And if you don't, as you showed that example of people delivering food at your doorstep, that was never even a thought in their mind, that reinvention is critical. Without reinvention, then it's just theory.
Even just in our little town of Montague here, we've got our ward councillor has put a business forum together for businesses to now come and start helping each other to start brainstorming ideas, because Montague is driven by international tourism, and that's going to be a lot longer than any other lockdown level. So they really do need to start reinventing themselves. So it's good that even our small little towns here are starting to think about how to do things differently. So, well, thank you, Antonella. Thank you, IRMSA, and thank you, members, for listening. And we hope you got some value. And hopefully we can all see each other soon in the flesh.